You're listening to the Heart of Giving podcast with Art Taylor, powered by bbbgive.org. Here we explore the motivations that form the basis of giving and service. We inspire generosity and celebrate the transformative effects that giving and service have on the human spirit and on community. The conversations featured on the podcast also uncover giving strategies that educate and provide tools to help listeners make impactful gifts of both their time and money. We hope you enjoy this episode.
This is the Heart of Giving podcast, powered by bbbgive.org. Give.org is the nation's standards-based charity evaluator, and it's your one-stop source for information on giving and reports on the most asked about charities. I'm Art Taylor. Today, my guest is Sean Carroll, and he is the CEO of Anera, which is an organization that is working in the Middle East to provide aid to those who are affected by the situation going on in Israel and Gaza and Lebanon. And I wanted to hear from Sean about what he's seeing on the ground, how they're going about delivering aid, some of the recognition we should also give to some of his team that is doing this work in quite dangerous circumstances, and also to help give us an understanding of how we can be helpful. Sean, welcome to the Heart of Giving podcast.
Thank you, Art. It's good to be with you. Thanks very much.
Sean, this is not necessarily the best of circumstances for us to be having a show. But on the other hand, I think it's important for people to know what you're doing, how you're going about it. But I'd also like to give our audience just an understanding of your background, because you are uniquely qualified to be doing this work, having led the USAID as COO for about 3 years under the Obama administration and other international relief organizations, and now 7 years at Anera. But tell us how you got into this whole business of providing relief to those who are stricken by either disaster, man-made, or just circumstantial.
Sure, Art. It's this job, and it's really the best job I've ever had, and that's saying something, because I've had some very interesting jobs. I've worked with some amazing people doing very interesting and at times wonderful things. And it's a little bit of full circle for me. When I have an international background. My father was a Foreign Service officer. My mother's father was a Foreign Service officer, which is how my father learned about it. And my mother was the director of the Study Abroad office at Georgetown University. And so I had an international upbringing. When I was going to school, I worked at a place called the Center for Immigration Policy and Refugee Assistance. And while I was in school, I was also a DJ on the radio station, and in high school and in early university, I was a guy who was listening to new wave music and trying to get other people excited in it. And I went to the Live Aid concert in 1995, July 1995.
I remember that in Philadelphia.
Yeah, that's right, in Philadelphia, and simultaneously in London. So some of the artists performed in London in the morning, and then flew to Philadelphia and performed that day in both places. So I went to that concert, and shortly after the concert, my boss at the Center for Immigration Policy and Refugee Assistance asked me if I had ever heard of Bob Geldof. And I said, "What? Yes, of course I've heard of Bob Geldof. The Boomtown Rats, I have all their albums. They're some of my favorites." And he said, "Well, he was just in here this weekend." I said, "What? How did I miss him?" And he said, "We've gotten a contract to deliver the Live Aid proceeds." And I ended up working as a work-study intern there. I ended up working on helping to hire and organize the consultants, the development experts who were looking at the Live Aid grants that had come in to use the Live Aid funding. And 40 years later, I've joined Anera, and I'm a generalist. I worked around the world. I'm not a Middle East expert. I've learned a lot in the last 7 years, but I think it's because I had once lived in Jerusalem working for the National Democratic Institute. My kids happen to have been born there. Someone recently said he's the father of Palestinians, because we were living in East Jerusalem when my twins were born there. But these are tough times. I don't think any of us imagined it could get this bad. And though this has been the best job I've had in my, it's really trying right now. We're drained, we're frustrated, we're sad, we're angry. It shouldn't be this hard to try to keep humanity going.
Yeah. Let's talk about Anera a bit and how you got connected to that organization, and we can get into its work as well.
Yeah, well, I got contacted by a search firm and asked if I'd be interested, and I knew a bit about Anera from the time that I had lived in Jerusalem, working in the West Bank and Gaza in the late 90s, shortly after the Oslo II Accords, and I learned a bit about them. But it's a funny thing in life. If I hadn't lived there before, and probably even if my kids hadn't been born there might not have been enough of a hook for the search firm, right? They would have wanted someone who's got some connection, and I didn't. Other than that, I didn't have a strong connection to the region, and I had a tiny bit of Arabic, but not enough really. But having that experience and kids being born there, I think gave me a look, and I had done a lot of relevant work, and I was just absolutely thrilled when I was chosen to be the next CEO and president of Anera. There have only been 4 in Anera's 56 years. They asked me when I started, they said, "Hey Sean, your predecessor was here 10 years and the guy before him was here 30 years. We hope you'll stay a while." And I said, "Well, I have no plans on leaving early, but let's see how we do, how you like me and how it works." But 7 years in, and I'm just honored every day that I get to do this work, that I get to work with the people that I'm working with, and the support that we're getting keeps us going, because otherwise we just wouldn't be able to. I think we would all implode in on our sadness and frustration at how hard this is. But every day we're getting a new partner saying, "Can we work with you on the Gaza response, now on the Lebanon response?" We have 70,000 new donors since October 7th. We have donors that I haven't even met in person yet, but on the strength of what they see when they look at the work that our team in Gaza is doing, they've given large sums and they've given again. And in a time like this, people want to respond. People want to bring out the best in themselves and in their community in terms of supporting humanity. But they also want someone they feel like they can trust. And Anera's been doing this for a long time. We've got a good reputation. We've got all the top scores on the charity watchdog groups, including yours, and that gives people confidence that if I want to help, but I want to make sure that my support goes to who needs it most, and goes quickly and goes effectively and efficiently, and to see that outpouring of support of people who I think are both saying we want to help on the emergency humanitarian crisis, and we also want to see something new and different in the Middle East. We want to see peace and security and prosperity and dignity for everyone, and we want to see everyone's aspirations and opportunities be realized and be equal. And so I think a lot of support is coming to us for that reason.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you mentioned the work we do to accredit charities at the Wise Giving Alliance. It's a rigorous process that organizations go through to meet the 20 standards that we use to evaluate charities against. And so we're always grateful when organizations like yours are willing to provide what we need to do that accreditation, and then go forward to proudly display our charity seal so that people understand that you've gone through that rigorous work and that you are both transparent, accountable, and trustworthy. So I do appreciate you mentioning that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I wanted to also just ask you, you mentioned your background as being one of the reasons that the organization hired you. What would you say now, given your 7 years of experience, that your background has done to make this job a fit for you?
Well, I often say that I believe the greatest strength of our organization, of Anera, is that from the very beginning, it was people who do have very strong and deep ties to the region we're working in, and people who don't, and that provides allyship, and it provides validation of the people who have a connection and know what needs to be done and know what's the right thing to be done. So that combination of Arab Americans, diaspora, Palestinians, Lebanese, and non-Arab, white Americans, and Jewish Americans, and Latinos, and Asians, everyone together, recognizing that this is something important. So our founders, our board, our staff, our donors are all a mix, and that, I think, is a real strength that is not there if there are lots of great organizations that don't have that, and you don't have to have that. You can have an organization that's entirely made up of one community that's supporting that community. But I think when a community needs a lot of support and can get it coming from outside the community as well, I think that's very powerful. And having that mix right from the beginning, and again, at all the levels of the founders, the donors, the staff, the board, it's strong. So I think as long as we always have that mix, I think we'll be strong.
Yeah. Someone asked me the other day how I define diversity, and it kind of aligns with what you're saying. I said that diversity to me is the ability and willingness to bring in the broadest spectrum of humanity to achieve a mission and to achieve an objective, so that you can get the best results both for the people you're serving and for those who contribute to your work.
Absolutely.
And it seems that you figured that out as well. The broadest spectrum of humanity possible will give you, in many cases, those results. It's not easy, though.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, and it's also the perspectives, right? You need perspectives, and you can easily forget. You can easily fall back on the people you know, the people you're comfortable with, the people that look and sound like you, and then you're losing perspective that's a valuable perspective that's several valuable perspectives that you don't want to lose.
Yeah.
So that's important.
What are you seeing on the ground now?
Oh, I'm seeing a lot of horror and tragedy and inhumanity. If you've worked in this region, and particularly on this issue of Israel, Palestine, Israel, Arab peace, you've gotten used to the challenges and the disparities, frankly, in the value of life. But even with that experience, and even seeing that a lot of what we're experiencing now, we've experienced in the past, just at a different level, even with that, this is shocking. It's shocking how brutal it's been, how long it's gone on. And really what the hardest piece is, you can recognize it's a war, you can recognize there are security concerns on both sides, but the disparity in the levels of humanity and value of life is really stark, and in the end, that's not going to help anyone. If a country believes they're going to gain more security by trying to stomp out the perceived enemy, then they just got it wrong. I've worked in this for long enough to know. I worked in South Africa, I worked in Northern Ireland. It's you don't build security by stomping on, by crushing, by devaluing, dehumanizing the other side, and there's far too much of that here, and that's the hardest part of this. It's that there's been a level of dehumanization that allows the death and destruction to go on without much check on it, and that's what has to stop. That's what's very hard.
Yeah. Well, there's certainly a lot of debate around the war there and its moral grounds, so to speak. And we as Americans sort of watch it from afar, and what we get are what we're fed from the media, and we try to use our own interpretations of what we see. Sometimes we're right, sometimes we're not, but it's very challenging, I would say, as an American citizen to just watch what we're seeing, what we're given. And we do hope that at some point soon that this will all come to an end. I want to ask you though, how difficult is it to provide aid? Because I think regardless of how we see the war, we don't want to see people go hungry, innocent people go hungry and without shelter and so forth. How are you able to do that? Are you able to actually get the aid to people who are in need of it? And how difficult is it to do that?
Yeah, we are able to, but it's far too difficult. We now, in what's later this week, will be 1 year of war. We've delivered over 41 million meals. We've delivered about 8 million medical treatments and tens of thousands of tents and mattresses and blankets and clothing and menstrual packs and hygiene kits, but it's far too hard and it's not nearly enough. Anera is only working in Palestine, Lebanon, and Jordan, but some of the humanitarian crisis responders who've worked elsewhere in the world, in Sudan and Somalia and Ethiopia and Ukraine and Haiti, they say they've never seen anything like this combination of people not being able to leave, with people with this level of civilian deaths and injuries, with aid workers and health workers and journalists targeted. The numbers of innocents and the numbers of people who are working to try to alleviate human suffering and work on the humanitarian crisis being targeted makes it so that people are saying they've never seen anything like this. They can't believe it, and it really is just too hard. About 20% of the need has gone in. So if you hear people say nothing's going in, that's not correct and can be dangerous, because it could provoke donors to not give, right? They say, well, if nothing's going in, then why am I going to give? And we don't want that to happen. But it's also wrong. It's a mischaracterization, a lie, a gaslighting if people are saying there's no humanitarian crisis, there's no need for more aid, there's enough aid, there are enough calories going in. It's just not the case. And we're seeing about 20% every day going, on average, every day going in, compared to what used to go in both in aid and commercial goods going in before October 7th. There would be 500 trucks a day, and now we've got about 120 trucks a day. So it's just not enough. And I say to the people who say it is enough, I say, well, then what's wrong with twice as much? If you think the Palestinians in Gaza have enough, they have enough to not just survive, but to not be at risk of death from hunger or disease or a combination of the above, and you're not paying for it, then what does it matter to you if you really say there's no limit to the amount of aid? If you also believe there's enough aid in already, well, let's just double it. Let's have them have twice as much as they need. And in fact, we would know that that's really only getting you to 45% of the need. So we need to have 4 or 5 times as much going in. If we could start with twice as much as what's going in, that would be a big help. There are hundreds of trucks in Israel of donated goods donated by Israeli citizens, Palestinian Israelis, Jewish Israelis, who've donated 8,800 tons, more than 400 truckloads of food and hygiene products, and the Israeli government's issued a policy that no donated goods from Israel can go into Gaza, and we can't figure out exactly why that would be. Whose interest is that serving? How is that in any way fortifying security? There are 5,000 trucks sitting in El Arish, the closest Egyptian town to the southern Gaza border, that could all come in. There are trucks coming from Jordan, there are trucks coming from the West Bank, and it's just not all getting in fast enough and at the volume we need. So it's creating desperation, it's creating looting, it's creating war profiteering, none of which existed before. Gaza, I've been to Gaza 15 or 20 times. I've never felt unsafe or uneasy there. I walk around, we go wherever we want. It's a society that suffered from a lot, but crime and indiscriminate killing and injury and unsafe conditions were not something that either the residents of Gaza or visitors ever face. So this is new, and it's a result of not enough aid going in and not enough security on the ground. But it all starts with really not having enough aid. So if people are desperate, they'll do desperate things, and that's not something we would see before, even in the first months of this war, but now we're starting to see it. So the combination of not having enough safety for humanitarian aid workers and health workers, and the desperation that's going on in Gaza now, the war profiteering, it's made for a situation where we cannot safely deliver aid. We're still delivering aid because the need is so great, but we're not doing it safely.
Mm. Now, is the U.S. government contributing aid as well?
They are. They are contributing aid. We were fortunate to learn just this morning, in fact, that we are going to be getting a grant, an award from the U.S. Agency for International Development to work on the health sector recovery over the next few years. We hope we can get some of the humanitarian aid as well, but mostly our assistance is not from the U.S. government at the moment. It's from 70,000 new donors, it's from corporate donors, it's from the UN, it's from other governments. The government of the UAE has been providing both donated product and funding to help deliver it. So we have a lot of there are now 80 partners, governments, UN agencies, other NGOs that are doing their work in Gaza with us or through us. So that's been a bit of a salve to the horror. It gives us a shot in the arm to keep going, and that's been good. We'd like to see more U.S. support overall and coming to us, but it has been providing aid and can do a lot more. And mostly, the U.S. government can do is put pressure on Israel to allow more aid in.
Mm. So would it be accurate to say it is the policy of the United States to provide aid to those who are stricken by war?
No, it is. It is the policy. It's
Yes.
Many people have a hard time when they recognize that on the one hand, the U.S. continues to supply weapons, including offensive weapons, including 2-ton so-called dumb bombs that do not provide for precision targeting, but in fact end up killing far too many civilians. So any government that's providing weapons that are killing civilians and then also turning around and delivering aid, you can imagine it makes people pretty cynical.
How about your people? How are they faring? The people you have on your team who are out there trying to get this aid to those in need, what are they facing in their attempts to deliver?
Well, they're facing danger every day, and we lost one colleague. On October 7th, we had 12 permanent staff in Gaza, and we lost one on March 8th. He died in an Israeli missile strike. His young son died a few days later of his injuries.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, thank you. It's very hard. In 56 years of working, it's the first time we lost a staff member. Other staff lost many family members. Other staff have been shot at several times but have not been injured. So they're risking their life and limb every day. They're also using work and their response, I think, as a positive coping mechanism. They're living in tents and they've been displaced, some of them 8 or 10 times, and getting out there and helping their community and continuing to deliver aid every day gives them something positive to look forward to every morning and to contribute. So I think it's a positive coping mechanism, but it's also hard to imagine. I can't imagine waking up in my tent every morning, miles from where I'm supposed to be living, cut off from the rest of my family, tidying up the tent, hoping the rain from the night before didn't come in, and going off to deliver aid and hoping you make it back to see your kids in the tent at the end of the day, or that they'll still be there when you come back. I mean, we had one staff member who, when he was out delivering aid, found out that his tent with his son in it was being shot at. the other aide the colleague that we lost had just come back from a day of delivering aid. He still had on his Anera sweatshirt. He came into his shelter, his displaced home, and sat down with his family for coffee and was killed. So it's hard to imagine. I think it's hard for all of us to imagine. And there are other smaller things that are hard to imagine. The lack of privacy. No one's had any privacy for a year. Can you imagine not ever finding a space just to be by yourself? Some people are refusing to eat because they don't want to stand in the lines for the latrines. It's bad. I know we don't have a full appreciation. We who work on this and have colleagues there that we can talk with, and we see the photos and the videos, it's still hard to fully fathom. And if you're not as immersed and as close to this as we are, then I think it's impossible. And Gaza in particular was a real blind spot for this country, and particularly policymakers. People didn't go to Gaza. It was too hard. It was considered unsafe, although, as I said, I've gone many times and never felt unsafe. But the Israelis would say it's unsafe, the U.S. government would say it's unsafe, and so people didn't go. And when you're dealing with something you don't know what it is or what it's like, and you've been painted a narrative of a strip of land full of terrorists, then it's hard to understand the level of destruction and despair and dehumanization that's gone on. But I think we've also seen that the world has recognized. I mean, students are protesting, people are gathering in the streets, people are asking for divestment and for reconsideration of relations because they recognize that this has got to change.
Yeah. When I want to think about supporting this, I guess we could always make a donation to your organization, and I'm sure you would put that to great use. But what are the kinds of aid that people can give? I know money is one, but what other are there any other ways people can be helpful?
Yeah, well, money is always the best because our staff on the ground know what needs to be done, and a lot of things we do need to procure locally.
Yeah.
And it's people they always want to give items, donate items, which is always
it's a challenge.
It's a challenge. It's very heartwarming. I was going to say that people will, but it's a challenge because it's a challenge to collect it all and deliver it, and we have to be sure. So we do a lot of product donation, but it's done at a very professional level, very high volume. There are organizations that specialize in procuring medicines from pharmaceutical companies, and they all come sealed and packed and in full boxes and containers, and other items get donated too, but they usually get procured nearby in Egypt or in Jordan or in the West Bank and sent. It's harder if households, much as it shows a huge effort of generosity and humanity, it's hard to collect donated goods and make sure that they're the right things and that they don't end up costing more to transport than they're worth in value. And so it is a challenge to collect donated goods, but so cash is always the best. But another thing people can do is just share the stories and let people know. And maybe if people can't give a lot, but they'd like to feel like they're involved, they'd like to feel like they're supporting, they can be a monthly donor for $5 a month, and then when they start hearing about the work that we're doing, and this is true of any other organization they want to choose, they hear about the work we're doing and they can share that with other people. Say, hey, I know we can feel helpless, I know we can feel like this problem is too big, too far away, too unknown to us, but I'm doing something, I'm contributing $5 a month, and I'm finding out what the organization is doing with my support, and I'm feeling like I can make a difference, and every little bit does make a difference. Knowing that we have 70,000 new donors, many of them monthly donors. We worked for years on getting the number of monthly donors up, and I think we got it from a few hundred to just about 1,000 monthly donors, and now we have 3,000 monthly donors, and it's always it's always sad that it takes front page news to get people paying attention, but it's also, it makes sense, right? It's until it's front page news, maybe you don't even hear about it. You don't find out. Now people are hearing about it, they're finding out, and they're raising their hand and saying, how can I help? And some of them are giving one-time big checks, and some of them are signing up to be small dollar monthly donors, and some people are doing both. We have one woman who's writing us a $10,000 check every week. Every week she writes us a new $10,000 check, and that's someone who didn't know us before and didn't know our work before. So it's really heartening, and this is a very generous country, the United States. People give a lot, but there's a lot of wealth in this country as well, and if everyone gave at the level that their family or their church or their religion or their spirit or their generosity, would suggest they give, if everyone gave at that level, we'd be doing 5, 10, 20 times as much as the U.S. government does, and then we'd really be saying this is from the American people. So I do encourage people to check into the Giving Alliance and make sure they're doing their due diligence on who does good work, who are the wise, what does the Wise Giving Alliance say, and check out Anera and our work, and love to hear from people and love to have their support. It feels like it's going to be a long road, but as Martin Luther King Jr. reminded us, the arc of history is long, but it bends towards justice, and I think that I think we'll be in this for a long time, but people want humanity to prevail.
Sean, tell me, how are companies supporting you in your efforts?
Oh, this has been something that has really been the breadth and scale of it has been a pleasant surprise, frankly. I mean, companies, particularly in a politically charged environment, are often reluctant, but we now have, I believe we're up above 150 companies that are matching their employees' donations to Anera, and we've had several companies give large direct donations, but some of these matches have been huge, from UBS, from the McCormick Group, from AstraZeneca, from Pfizer, and just a lot of companies matching their employees' contributions. So that's been huge. Again, I think it's, as I said, people want to help in an emergency crisis, but I think particularly here they're saying, wow, this really feels like not the right situation, and it needs to change, and if I can be part of building a brighter, more hopeful future for everyone, I want to be a part of that. And I think companies are recognizing that. I mean, people after October 7th, they stood with Israel, and companies made their support for Israel known, and obviously this U.S. government did. I think quickly people said, well, what about the Palestinians? Don't they also have a right to their aspirations? Don't they have a right to defend themselves? Don't they have a right to resist subjugation and occupation and an inordinate amount of death and destruction to civilians? So, most of it is people just wanting to respond to the humanitarian crisis, and that is great. I also do think that in this case, people are saying, wow, this has got to change, and how can I be a part of that change? And to see companies doing that too, saying, yes, we recognize that Palestinians are human. This is about humanity. This is about saving innocent lives. This is about not allowing ourselves to slide in to a situation of just, gruesome horror and grotesque loss of innocent lives. And we've been heartened to see all of that support. It's most of it, as I say, is people just want to provide a meal. They want to provide a tent. They want to provide some medical supplies, and that's been heartening.
Your people, I want to go back to them just briefly, because you mentioned that there are, how many, 12 on the ground right now?
Yeah, we've hired a few more since then, because we're doing a lot of work. Yeah.
Are any of them Americans?
No, it's all local staff.
Okay.
Our country director, who's in Ramallah, is a dual citizen. She's Palestinian American, but it's all local staff, and the combination of having local staff who are working in the communities that they're from and they grew up in, with having a U.S. NGO backing them up, and having me, and we have Palestinians who are working with us here in the U.S. My advisor and special assistant is from Gaza, and his mother and brother are still there, and so having those connections makes us strong. But not having expatriate workers meant that on October 7th, October 8th, and 9th, we could just start doing the work. Our staff knew where to go, and they didn't have to think about, am I going to stay or am I going to go? Unfortunately, they didn't have an option, but they knew my community is being hit. My community is going to be hit hard. I'm a international humanitarian worker working for an organization that provides me support, that can bring in more support, and they just got to work. And that combination's been very strong. And I think it's a combination that all of us, or many of us in the humanitarian space, in international human development space, we're always striving to have that balance of how do we have global support or support from a U.S. NGO and the funding that's available to us here, but being driven by the know-how, the ideas, the solutions, the agility of staff that are working in the communities they're from. If you can get that combination right, it can be very powerful, and that's what we're seeing here. That's why we're seeing that despite all the obstacles of how hard it is to get aid in, all the barriers, we're able to get aid in and get it to where it's needed most and make sure it's not diverted. That's another thing. People think that everything that goes in is being diverted by Hamas or by thieves, and it is getting dicier now, as I said, because there's desperation and war profiteering, but for the most part this entire year and in the years and bombing campaigns before it and our regular sort of it's been a war for a long time, but in the times of relative peace where there aren't bombs falling, we do our work and we're not harassed. Hamas doesn't ask us for anything. We don't ask for them for anything. We just do our work at the community level, and that's made for a successful operations and effectiveness.
Well, as I think about all of this, the unfortunate situation that you're working through probably won't end, it seems, until the military objectives are achieved. And so I hope that happens soon so that we can get through this. But in the meantime, I hope that your organization gets every penny that it needs to help as many people as possible, because I think most of us are horrified by what we imagine and see going on there as a result of all this. And we want people to have the basics that they need to survive in this difficult moment. There's so many innocent people who are impacted here, and we want to see them helped. And I appreciate everything that your organization is doing, and I appreciate you for your leadership on this. And I wish you all the best as you go on expressing through your organization our aspirations for people to get help and the services that they so desperately need. So thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Now, to all of you who are listening, this is the Heart of Giving podcast. We are a weekly show with a new episode every Tuesday. I hope you will subscribe to the show. You can do that by going to the BBB Wise Giving Alliance's YouTube channel and subscribe there, or for the audio version, you can do that by going to any major podcast platform and typing in the Heart of Giving podcast. So I hope we'll see you back here next week, and I thank you for listening.
You've just listened to the Heart of Giving podcast with Art Taylor. Be sure to tune in next time for a brand new episode. To listen to our other interviews, visit heartgiving.podbean.com. That's heartgiving.podbean.com. www.podbean.com. Subscribe to our show on major podcast platforms. The thoughts and opinions expressed on this podcast are the views and opinions of the guests, not those of the BBB Wise Giving Alliance or program affiliates. This podcast is for information and educational purposes only and is copyrighted with all rights reserved. This podcast is protected by Podbean's terms of service.